All right, folks, welcome back to the East to West Hunts podcast. I'm your host, Alex Gruin, and today we are covering off on what I would call Hunting Tags 101. The goal here is to go over everything you need to know to get started if you were to begin applying for tags today. Okay. Now, this is a great episode for anybody and everybody either starting or maybe you've been applying for years. If you can get one thing out of this episode, I think that's a win. But we're going to fully pretend that you know nothing and you are just entering into the ball game of I want to get a tag to go hunt out west. This can be used for some eastern opportunities, but let's just pretend that we're going out west for a hunt. Okay, so what do we need to know as far as the basics? Well, what the hell is a tag? Okay, a tag is essentially what gives you the right to go and harvest whatever animal you are trying to go hunt. Okay, so you're going to hear permits, locking tags, licenses, all kinds of different verbiage depending on the state. Okay. For the purpose of not confusing the living bejesus out of you, we're just going to use tags as the reference for everything. Okay. Keep it super simple at this point. Now, I get the question all the time. What's the difference of a draw tag and over the counter tag? It's confusing the hell out of me. Okay. Well, over the counter tags. Over the counter tags are essentially what you can just go into a store and purchase. Okay, so I want to go and hunt X species, and this state has over the counter tags for that species. I get to walk into a Cabela's. I get to give them my credit card and my driver's license, maybe my hunter safety card, and they are going to take my money and print me out a license to go hunt that species for whatever designated dates. Okay, pretty simple. All right. Now, what is a draw tag? Okay, a draw tag means that there is some form of lottery, randomized, or maybe some kind of point series that goes into it, but it means that you are not a for sure bet that you are going to get that tag in any given year and that you need to get drawn to get it. Okay, so let's jump into what that question is going to lead to, which is help me understand what are points, okay? And what are the differences of preference points, bonus points, or a like draw lottery? Okay, so a lottery means think of you're going to go play Mega Millions, you're going to buy your 5 numbers, and now it's randomized. Are you the lucky soul that got their numbers picked, right? It's kind of the same exact thing as far as a overall lottery, okay? New Mexico is a good example of this. If I apply and I want to get an elk tag, the only way of looking at statistics potentially is, well, how many tags do they have for residents and non-residents available for each particular unit? And how many people applied last year? If they would statistically stay exactly the same into the following year, we know that there's the same amount of tags for residents and non-residents, and we know that there's 100 people in there, and that would give you draw odds essentially. But every year, yeah, there could be more or less people applying. There also could be tag changes year to year, meaning there could be more or less tags in that unit. So those are things that you'd want to know because they will play into your draw odds. But assuming that everything was staying the same year to year for simplicity purposes, that's how you would look at a draw. And if your name is selected out of the hat, you would get that tag. Okay, so that's a random lottery essentially. What are bonus points? So certain states have bonus points, and I'm going to keep this one simple too, not necessarily going specifically into every state's kind of lottery structure with their bonus points, but bonus points can be a lottery as well. If you think about it, it just means that the more bonus points you have your name in the hat more. Okay, so think of it this way. Here's how you accumulate bonus points. This year, you apply and you do not draw. So now you have 1 bonus point. The next year you apply and you don't draw, you would have 2 bonus points. Or, hey, I have no intention of drawing a tag this year, but I want to buy a point. So you can accumulate a point. To keep it super simple, you can only get 1 point per year per species in most states. Okay. So if I want to hunt elk, I can get an elk point in X state. I want to get a mule deer point, a bonus point, in X state. I can just go buy that point if they do that. Okay. And over time, statistically, you'd build up more opportunities. I like to call them raffle tickets, where your name is put in the hat more. And now they're going to roll the dice there, right? They're going to roll the drum and potentially they're going to pick your name out of the hat. Then you get that tag. Okay. The preference points are, I think, the most consistent. And what I mean by that is a preference point is exactly what it sounds like. You have preference over the other person. So if you're going to apply in a unit, we're going to use Colorado for this example because they have preference points at this moment. It basically means that if I am applying in a unit that from prior seasons required 0 points to draw a tag and I have 1 point, I should draw that tag because I have preferential treatment in how many points I have compared to the statistical average. Also means that if you have 0 points going into it and I have 1 point, I have preference over you, right? So that's kind of 2 different ways that you can look at that. So you can purchase these points and then you accumulate them. For the most part, you can apply and then you get these points. But each state has their own rule sets that really can confuse you or can add to the excitement of how you apply and get a tag. Okay. So state-specific systems is a question that I get quite a bit. So, hey, how do some tag systems differ from state to state? I'll give you the Cliff's Notes version here. Idaho, that is a random draw state, meaning if we're going to throw in every year, we have kind of the same shot as everybody else given whatever unit that you're applying for. Okay, so again, let me preface that each particular area of a state is not exactly the same draw odds. Okay, different units will have different draw odds based on how it's being managed and buck to doe ratios and is it over under population, so on and so forth. So bear that in mind. But if you're selecting a particular area to apply, statistically your odds are just as good as anybody else's because there's no preferential treatment in how you get that tag. Montana has the most confusing system on the planet because it uses preference points and it uses bonus points. So there are limited entry tags and there are general tags. Okay. And I know they're called permits and whatever else. So let's not get into the weeds in Montana. I just want to keep it very consistent for everybody. So in Montana, in order for you to draw a limited entry tag, you essentially have to draw the general license. Okay. And the general license is called a combo. Super confusing. And essentially you have to get preference points, not necessarily to draw, but it does give you preferential treatment as you go along. I'm going to confuse the bejesus out of you here. 0 points has, let's say, 40 to 50% draw odds that you would draw this general license. And you could pick if you want to draw a big game combo, a elk or deer combo. And why it's called a combo is because it has a combination of a bunch of things: fishing license, upland bird, and so on and so forth. Anyways, essentially you get to pick, do I want to hunt elk under this general license? Do I want to hunt deer under this general license? Or do I want to hunt both? And there's a different price portion to it. But if you draw that and you applied to hunt in one of the limited entry areas or hunts, that's kind of what qualifies you that they will throw you into the limited entry bucket. And that's where bonus points come in. So you can purchase preference points and you can also purchase bonus points. If you have more questions on the whole process of Montana, please reach out to me, as this is a very, very common question. But let's just keep it there. All right, Wyoming. Wyoming uses preference points. Okay, so you can purchase points at a particular time of the year only. Then you can also apply. The interesting thing about Wyoming is it does have a randomized side to the drawing itself, but for consistency's sake, let's just talk about it being a preference point state. Now, Colorado. Colorado is a true preference point state at this time. Why I say at this time is there are upcoming changes that I will cover off on another episode that will change how the draw works. But for now, the more points you have, the better it is for whatever unit you're trying to apply. However, attention hunters, are you sick and tired of the complicated draw systems and tag applications that take place out west? Or maybe you want to plan a western hunt, or maybe one of your dream hunts, and you don't really even know where to start. Well, that's where East to West Hunts comes in. We take care of everything for you. We'll do the tag applications. We just need to put a strategy in play for you of what you're trying to do and when you're trying to go. Whether it's short term, mid-term, or long term, we want to have that play and that strategy together. And when you do draw a tag, we can look at do-it-yourself options, such as hunt plans that detail out exactly how to hunt those areas, or we can get you booked with a guide and outfitter in that specific unit or area. So don't leave that hunt to chance. Give us a call, set up a time on the website, contact us on social media, whatever it is, and let's get planning towards that dream hunt of yours. And let's make it a reality. Check us out on www.east2westhunts.com. Again, that is www.east2westhunts.com. Also check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and podcast. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon. If you have 1 point and you're applying in a 20-point unit, at this moment in time, you statistically would never be able to catch up to the people that have more points. And if that unit requires 17 points to draw, I don't think you'll ever reach it. So you just have to have some form of thought process there of what you're applying to and what's realistic and what's unrealistic for you. Now you're going to jump into Utah. Utah is a bonus point system. And again, they have some caveats to how things work, but we're just going to call it a bonus point system just for consistency's sake here. And then New Mexico. New Mexico is a complete draw, no points whatsoever. So you're just as lucky as anybody else applying for whatever unit you decide to apply into. Nevada and Arizona are bonus point states. Okay, so statistically, having more points can help you, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you are guaranteed a tag. In Arizona, again, there are caveats in the way that the draw system works where things can be targeted towards the most point holders as well. But for a statistical point of you just starting out, you need to know it's a bonus point system. So here's a really good question. Which states are like the most beginner friendly for getting started with tags? Well, I think this really is going to lie on what you're trying to hunt, and are you focused on trophy quality? Are you really focused on just getting out in the field? But for the most part, I would say that Montana is a good state that's beginner friendly because you technically could hunt it, if you get lucky, every year. But I would say every other year consistently you could hunt it for like elk and deer. Okay. And honestly, even pronghorn, you could probably get a tag just depending to where you're hunting, so on and so forth. But keep in mind that you also would want to have private land access in some scenarios, and maybe that's feasible for you, maybe it's not. So again, it really depends on, you and what you value here. I think Colorado is a very good opportunity state. So it's something that you could start hunting in, and it would be a really good scenario for you. Utah has some opportunities to get out in the field, especially for elk, and I think it's a pretty good beginner situation for you. The other ones that I think that you should consider would be like an Idaho or a New Mexico. And the reason that I say that is because there are no points in those states. So you could apply and you could get a tag. And Idaho has what they call a general sale in December right now. And essentially, those are like first come, first serve tags that you can purchase online or in store, live if you're in Idaho at the time. Essentially, it's like game and fish offices and so on and so forth. But that in reality is a good opportunity for you as well. Okay, so I think there are some really good places to think of as like starting points. But again, it's going to really depend on what you're trying to hunt. Because if you came to me, said, hey, Alex, should I do my applications? And here's what I'm interested in. I would really ask you, like, are you wanting trophy quality, or are you wanting opportunity, or a mix? And if you said a mix, or you want trophy quality, I would really start leaning into more of those trophy states. But you just have to know that you could be waiting a very, very, very long time before you're going to draw a tag. I think there is this thought process that, oh, I'm going to have 3 or 4 points in Arizona and I'm going to draw the most amazing tag ever. In reality, it could be like 20 years. So like 4 points is not a lot. And statistically, that's not going to give you very, very good odds. Let's put it that way. So you really have to know what you're doing, and you really have to have that conversation with yourself about how long you are wanting to wait to hunt. Okay. More for that, but just think about that for a little bit. All right. What's the difference between resident and non-residents when it comes to tag availability and pricing? Well, here's the easiest way of looking at it. Whatever state you live in is going to put preferential treatment to you as a resident. Okay. However, non-residents might love to hunt your state, and therefore your state is going to jack up the price. And that just basically means like, hey, you are not a resident of our state, but you want to take advantage of it, so you're going to pay way more. Okay. So most states will give a large amount of tags to their residents, not a lot to non-residents. And that's where the fight for tags comes in. Okay. So most states in the West will give about 10% of their tags to non-residents and 90 to residents. Colorado is much more liberal to that. So, they might be giving 30, or I saw the new regulations that are coming up that I'll talk about later, but 25% are going to be for non-residents. So that's a really, really generous amount relative to most other states. All right. Hopefully that answered that question pretty easily. Here's another one. What are some strategies for increasing odds in a draw system? Well, I think this goes into play of having a tag application strategy. So I am big on one. You got to think about your budget. So first and foremost, how much money can you invest every year in tag applications? Now, this is going to get deep in the weeds, but most states require that you purchase a non-resident license before you even apply. I like to call that the ticket to just walk into the stadium, but then you still have to pay to watch the game. So think of it this way. I got my non-resident license, and now I have to pay to apply for elk, deer, pronghorn, sheep, moose, goat, whatever the hell I'm applying for. Okay. Most states, for consistency, I would say that if you're applying for 3 species and you're getting a license, expect to be somewhere about $150 to $200 in that state every year. So how much can you commit? If you can, I think it's awesome to have about 5 states in your tag application portfolio. And the reason for that is because think of this analogy. You have the yogurt shop, right? You're going to walk into a yogurt shop and they have different flavors of machines on the wall. And on this machine to my left here, they have vanilla chocolate and they have swirl, which is a mix. And on this one, you got toffee and you have vanilla cheesecake and something else. And then the third one, anyways, think of each one as a state. For whatever reason, maybe you're not feeling this flavor, or maybe the machine is broken down, aka you have no chance in hell of drawing. You're going to opt for what you could get, okay? And that gives you the opportunity to pull that lever while you are building opportunities in some of these other states. And then you start a rotation depending on how often you want to go out and what you're doing. So I think that is a really important part of your strategy in a draw system. Okay. The other thing is, if you want to get out more often, you really have to consider that, hey, maybe I'm going to have to hunt harder. Maybe I'm going to have to go and hunt with more people in there because they give out more tags. But I have better draw odds because of that. So if you're looking at your tag application strategy in a draw system, you might want to opt for some more opportunity areas where your options are a little bit better in drawing that tag. Okay. For the most part, a good strategy will involve having more states to have options and then really having opportunities of applying for stuff that maybe there are more tags in that you just have a better chance of drawing that. Lastly, I would consider adding over-the-counter tags into the mix if you don't draw certain states. Okay, that's kind of like your backup plan. All right. Are there any tools or websites that you recommend for researching and applying for tags? Yes. Okay. My favorite are the actual state game agencies. Okay. I personally use a lot of them. However, I also have every research tool known to man because of my tag application and hunt planning business. So I myself am a resource for folks, but let's throw some out there. You got Onyx that's going to give you top rut stats. You got Hunt and Fool. You got Go Hunt. You got Eastman's Tag Hub. There's a bunch of stuff out there. Myself, I am kind of on that high premier level of it because it's a fully consultative experience with a lot of time invested versus just going online and looking at something and figuring it out. So essentially, you don't have to spend too much time doing it besides answering a few questions, and then I do it for you. So it really depends on what you're trying to do. But for the most part, every single tool out there is using the state game agency information that they post. Okay, so whatever's released is technically the word, and they're basically uploading it or adding those statistics into their own methodology. Okay, so just know that. How do deadlines and application fees impact the process? Well, that's a very good question. Deadlines just basically mean at this point in time, once you hit this time, you cannot apply anymore. Okay. However, there are forks in the road there because certain states allow you to apply for a deadline. And then there is a deadline that's separate for just getting points. So, for example, if you miss the deadline for applying for a Wyoming elk, you can still later on in the fall get an elk point. Okay. Now, if you miss both of them, you're totally shit out of luck. Okay. You don't get to get a point then, and you are getting into the next year. The other thing is certain states will not give you a point if you apply and don't draw. They might make you go and apply for a point later. Okay. And they can spin it however they want. Like, oh, they're trying to save you money because maybe you don't want a point, you just want to apply. That's total malarkey. It's about getting you to do some kind of transaction of some sort. Okay. So let's just be honest with ourselves. All right, here's a good one. For first-time applicants, knowing the factor of rejection and also staying persistent. So you have to know that you are going to get rejected. Okay. This is like you are trying to get the hottest woman on the planet, and unfortunately, you're going to get rejected a whole lot of times before she's going to say yes from your persistence. So it's a funny thought process, but the reality is if you're trying to get a really good tag, you're going to do this over and over and over and over again, and you might question your own sanity, but hopefully eventually you will draw that tag. I say hopefully because there's no guarantees in this process. And the reality is things change year to year. So some of the most frustrating points for viewers and listeners, and especially clients of mine, is things change. And part of the reason that folks love a service is that things change and they don't want to keep up with all the information. They just want to be able to ask for the information or let you handle that. I fully understand that and appreciate that part, which is why I do what I do. But you just need to know that things are constantly changing. Okay, that is just reality. So you might have a certain system that you are applying for this year, and next year it's going to be completely different, and you're going to have to deal with that pivot, or you're going to decide, hey, maybe I don't want to do this anymore, and I'm going to move to something else, and that could be your persistence, right? Take advantage of that. But for the most part, you need to know that you are in for a long game. Okay. So I'm going to go on a little bit of a tirade here or a rant. Every year, I have folks reach out and they do not understand how hard it is to get certain tags. Okay. 5, 6, 7 years ago, it might have been easy to get a Wyoming antelope tag, or it might have been a lot easier to get a Wyoming elk tag. Okay. I literally have watched point creep year to year to year in Wyoming for elk tags, where 6, 7 years ago, it was pretty darn easy to get a general tag. And now we're looking at 5, 6 points to get a general tag. Okay. That's a huge amount of point creep. So, to what you might have used to been getting to what it is now, it's tough, and I've gotten some folks that don't want to continue after 4 years because they think that the point creep is just going to keep going on. And I would just say, they just kept on it for 1 or 2 more years, I think they'd have it, but that persistence did not pay off, or they weren't persistent enough to let it pay off, right? So they gave up. So I would just say, remember to continue staying true to what you wanted to do. And, in that case, you'd get that tag. However, if you come into it and you think it's easy to get a tag, you're going to be sorely mistaken when it's going to take you 4, 5, or 6 years to just get like a okay antelope tag. Okay. If you want to get an antelope tag in Wyoming, for example, unless you want to pay for an outfitter or you want to pay for trespass fees to get into an area, you're probably not drawing a tag for first few years. Okay. 0, 1, 2 point units, primarily going to be all private property. So you are paying to get on that land. Okay. Now, I know there's going to be some folks that listen to this and are going to say, oh, I did a 0 point unit and I killed an antelope. Dude, fantastic for you. Congratulations. It's not easy. And I don't recommend somebody go that route, because I would bet you that you got that tag not realizing how difficult it would be to do that hunt, but you made it happen, and that's kudos to you. But myself, I would not be applying for a private land checkerboard situation kind of hunt, or being limited to, a 200-acre parcel, and then that's now private, and then another 200 acres and it's private. That's a tough hunt, and you're really playing a lot of scenarios there that's going to potentially frustrate you. And yeah, that's a risk you're taking. That's all I'm saying. Okay. But you need to know that tags are not easy to get. Okay. And you really need to know mentally that you are going to be in for the long game. Rant is over. All right. Let's talk about planning for your future. Okay. So my thought here is like, how should you as a hunter balance short-term goals, over-the-counter opportunities, and long-term plans? Okay. I think the best way to answer this is to tell you exactly what I do. Okay. Let's go back to that ice cream scenario and the different, states and leverage points that you have. I have long-term opportunities in states that are what I would consider trophy states. Okay. Nevada, Arizona, Utah, even Wyoming. Okay. Those are states that I have either continued to accumulate points because I want to burn them on better opportunities. In some of them, I'm chasing those opportunities. I might never catch up to some of those top point holders, but I also have 10, 12, 11, 13 points in some states. So it might be different than if you were starting today. Needless to say, those are also states where Nevada, Arizona, Utah, there are bonus points. So at any point in time, I could be lucky and draw that tag. So I will either apply for points there to build them up, or I will throw my name in the hat to get lucky. This year, perfect example, I don't have a planned Western hunt yet. I know where I can draw for sure, but I am literally throwing in to every scenario possible. So I'm going to throw in swing for the fences in Arizona. I'm going to swing for the fences in New Mexico. I'm going to swing for the fences in Utah. I'm going to swing for the fences in Wyoming. Okay. Those are pretty much my swing for the fences. I'm also going to swing for the fences in Idaho for one of their big three species, which is moose. And maybe something will stick. Okay. Same deal for Colorado. I'm going to apply for sheep, moose, and goat. And then I am preserving my points for the meantime for everything else. And from there, we'll figure it out. Okay. So those are my longer term opportunities. Then I have shorter term opportunities. Montana is my shorter term opportunity. Okay. Because I applied last year for a preference point, and then this year I'm going to put in for a preference point before I go into the draw, which by the way is a whole nother ball game to their confusing system. But I would go into 2 points, which pretty much guarantees me the general tag, which means I will be hunting deer and elk in Montana this year if all else fails. Okay. If I did not want to do that, kind of would be eating my preference point, and I would go and get some form of over the counter tag as my last case scenario, or I want to have control of my season and I don't want to play around with all these other things. So I'm going to just throw a bunch of Hail Marys. If anything sticks, great. And if not, I am going to just relate to an over the counter state, which would honestly be I'd go do like a spike elk hunt in Utah, or I would go to Colorado for an over the counter tag. Okay. And that's it. There are states that have returned tags. I have done return tag hunts the past couple of years, actually, and I've gotten some really good tags. I'm very happy with those hunts, but I can't bank on those because you never know if you're going to be the quickest one to the draw to get those tags that come up for sale, right? Because you're essentially keyboard fighting with 100,000 other people. So I digress. But think of it that way. Long-term Hail Marys, maybe you're building up things. Short-term, hey, these are things that are going to maybe be 0, 1, 2, 3-point kind of deals. And then I got over-the-counter options. Okay, so you got to separate those things. Now, I did point into, like what would be some challenges or mistakes that I was thinking about. I think a challenge is in reality patience. I think that there's a lot of focus on, I saw these guys on YouTube and they're hunting every year, and I want to go and I want to hunt and be as good as these YouTube famous guys. Not saying that it's not possible, but you need to grind it out. Okay. And what I mean by that is either get out there and hunt more often to get better at the hunts, or save points and go out for some really good hunts and stop worrying about what you see on TV. And why I say that is because I think it really throws off reality for some folks, because you will not have months on end to be out. I think the reality is some folks are out for 200, 300 days a year pumping content. That's awesome. It's not your daily life. It's not daily life for most people. So throw that out. The reality is, do you either want to go on over the counter hunts or some shorter term hunts and get better at hunting? And then when you draw some of these really good tags, know what you're doing, or save your money. Okay, think of it this way. I did a Colorado mule deer and elk hunt this year. You can listen to the podcast episodes. We went with some beginners on their first elk hunt. Some really good tips, stories, and aha moments there. But the reality is that hunt is $1,500 to $2,000 if you do it by yourself or with some buddies with an over-the-counter tag. Maybe you don't go and hunt for 4 years, but you pocket away $1,500 or $2,000 that you would be spending. Then you get a tag and go hire an outfitter for $8,000 and increase your success rates. Okay. Or go out every year, grind it out, and you will learn a ton. There's nothing better than getting out there and seeing and learning more stuff. Okay. I'll use yesterday as an example. I literally had a day where I could squeeze out an afternoon evening hunt for whitetail and literally had 2 hours. I didn't even grab my saddle. I grabbed my tripod with my camera and my bow, and I just went out for a couple hours and ground hunted. And I had an awesome experience. I had a deer within 20 minutes behind me that pegged me, came around, looked at me, and we were kind of playing chess for a little bit. I could not get my bow to draw on her. It was exciting. It was exhilarating. It was fun, whatever you want to call it. But there were learned lessons in that. Okay. There was learned lessons in the way that I sat on the ground and positioned myself with my camera was not great for where that deer came in from. Okay. What would I do differently? Okay. If you were elk hunting and you screwed the pooch on something that simple, that could have been your whole hunt. You'd be kicking your own ass for the mistake that you made, and you would have not had another chance to do that again until the following year. So if you only did that hunt once every few years and you didn't really have learned lessons in multiples like that, you might not be successful for a really long period of time. So just consider that. Okay. I'm giving you different scenarios because this is supposed to be thought provoking for you. And I think those are common mistakes. Okay. I get it all the time. Hey, let's just keep getting for points. I want to get a really good tag. That's great. You've never hunted elk before. You're not going to have a clue what the hell you're doing. Do you want to go guided? No. Okay. I would highly suggest that you get some kind of a tag to go and burn the rubber before you make those first initial mistakes in land that you've never seen before, and you go eat a tag that's really, really good that people would be dying to get, and they have a much better experience behind them to be successful. Okay, rant over. All right, so another thought that you should know about reading the regulations before you apply for a tag or reading the regulations before you go out for a hunt. Okay, both big, but there are a lot of different regulations in different states about having your hunter safety card on you, how to tag an animal and where to place that tag. Now there's e-tags. Okay, e-tags are basically that you're doing them on the phone. Do you need to carry your license on you or not? Should you wear an orange hat, an orange vest, a pink hat, pink vest? Do they accept pink? Do they not want you to have orange, or it's not necessary? I want to use a crossbow in archery because it's legal in Illinois. Well, guess what? It might not be legal in that Western state. I have a muzzleloader. I drew a muzzleloader tag. Oh, but my muzzleloader can't have a scope on it in this state. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Now I need to figure everything out because I've always used a scope. Okay. These are all things that you should know before you apply to a particular state for that tag, because a lot of times you're going to draw and then you're going to essentially freak out, right? You're going to draw a tag in April. June, you're going to figure out that you might need to completely disassemble your muzzle loader. And then you're going to be hunting in October. You got 3 months. And then, by the way, you also procrastinated. And then you have a month left. And then now you're figuring something out. You went to the range one time. Oh, by the way, shooting a muzzleloader is a total pain in the ass, and I got to clean the thing 17 times after every shot. And now I've literally shot it 3 times, and I have no clue how accurate I am, but I got to go on this hunt because I drew this tag. It sounds like a flipping disaster, doesn't it? Read the regs, know what the hell you're applying for, or ask the right questions so somebody could answer them for you before you just blindly apply for something and then you go figuring it out. Don't do the disaster scenario. And literally, that's a real example. All right. What are some of my closing tips or thoughts? I think that you really need to map out how much money you want to apply in licenses and applications every year. Do you want to go guided or unguided if you draw a tag? Okay. It's a big one. Who are you going to be hunting with? Okay. A number one question I always ask is somebody's going to set up a consultation with me. Maybe you're listening to this and you're going to set up a consultation with me. These are really important questions that I'm literally laying out there. One of them is, are you going to be hunting solo or will you be hunting with other people? And are those folks going to be involved in these applications? Okay. The reason for that is if we start applying for you and you start having 2, 3, 4 points, and then by the way, your buddy Joe decides to come and, oh my gosh, I want to hunt elk too, but I haven't been applying for 4 years. That's like a terrible scenario because they might totally ruin your odds, or they're not going to draw a tag and they need to tag along, or you're going to now start trying to opt in for something that maybe doesn't exist because you want to keep building your points. You kind of want your cake and eat it too. It doesn't set up things well. So you really need to know who's going to be involved with you. That's a big one. Okay. So get your hunting buddies in, get everybody applying at the same time, have plans. Okay. So who's going to be involved? How much money do you want to involve with it? Another question is, do you want opportunities or do you want trophies or both? Okay. So that's a big factor. I highly recommend you look at both scenarios and have a little bit of 50-50 in there, or maybe 80-20, whatever the case is. You should have a mix. But think about, do you want to fly? Do you want to drive? How far are you willing to travel? That's a big one, right? I get that a lot. Some folks are like, I live in Tennessee and I would prefer to hunt in Kansas, Utah, or Colorado because I don't want to drive to Wyoming, Idaho, Washington, or Arizona because they're further. Fair enough. I think you know where to draw your line in the sand there. That makes total sense. Okay. So I think those are pretty important questions to ask yourself. The last one, what weapon do you want to use? Okay. Some folks are hardcore archery. Some folks are only rifle. Some folks are, they don't discriminate. They're going to use every weapon under the sun, AKA myself. Okay. Because certain states are going to have better draw odds with certain weapons. So if you pigeonhole yourself to archery only and you want to hunt elk, for example, if all the elk tags are in the rut in archery, guess what? Kind of tough to get a tag. Okay. It's primo time. And then if you are hardcore rifle, some of those rifle tags are really hard because you might want the best rifle tag and there might be one tag in the unit and it requires 20 points and it might be somewhat randomized in the draw as well, but there's one tag. Okay. And if there's one tag in a lot of states, that's going to go to the top point holder. So consider that. All right. I think those are pretty much the biggest pieces of advice as far as like questions to ask yourself to know where to start and what avenue to go into. All right. Last piece. How do you know about all those deadlines? Again, deadlines are going to be posted on the websites. There are different sites that are going to give you deadlines. However, myself, I obviously have deadlines, reminders, and so on and so forth, but set reminders for yourself. Set what state you'd want to apply to and, what date is the deadline, and set it 2, 3, 4 weeks in advance and get after it. All right. Lastly, I'll give you a little bit of like a personal story for myself. in understanding tag systems. Okay. I started East to West hunts because I realized how difficult and how daunting it was for folks to navigate all of the different systems. Okay. Different draw systems, different deadlines, different tally of tags, which unit is best, so on and so forth, right? You open this book and you're like, holy crap, it's a freaking encyclopedia and I don't want to read it. I realized that there was a very high barrier to entry. And the reality is, folks want to talk to a person to get information versus just like giving you a piece of paper and read it, in my opinion, right? It's a lot easier to ask pointed questions. So I drew that from personal experience because I started applying out west and I started realizing this isn't easy. Okay. Long story short, kind of fast forward 15 years. Let's talk about a personal scenario where I've kind of played a certain system for tags. Let's use last year, 2 years ago as an example. Let's use 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I went and applied to 6 different states. And I went swinging for the fences, kind of like what I was talking about here. So I go swinging for the fences and I applied to Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Idaho, so on and so forth, right? And I end up landing a tag in Kansas and in Wyoming. Meanwhile, I also draw a tag in Colorado. Okay. So knowing the nuances of all the systems, Colorado is always a really good backup plan, in my opinion, because, well, two things. One, they allow you to refund your tag. And two, it's the latest draw result for the most part compared to most states. So I already knew what I drew in all these other states. And then I drew my Colorado tag and I said, I don't think I can swing all of these hunts. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to return my Colorado tag. I'm going to get a full refund and I'm going to get my points reinstated that I drew. At the time, I had drawn a pretty good mule deer tag with quite a few points. And then I said, well, I'm not going to be able to get a point this year because I'm returning that tag, but I'm going to get my points reinstated. So pretty much all I lost was gaining a point for the year, but I also saved all of the other years of points. So that's a win. And then I ended up going and hunting antelope in Wyoming, and I ended up going to Kansas, and that was a really great year for me. Okay. I think the reality is knowing those details and how to utilize them to your benefit is key. So if you want to deal with those things and you want to learn all those things, start researching, start reading all the regs, start getting information, get involved with some of those companies that are going to give you those points of information. And if not, and you want to talk to somebody, please reach out to myself and let's get you rolling with some kind of tag applications. And you don't have to worry about all those nuances, right? I think there's a factor of time is money and how much time do you want to invest in it. That's going to come down to how nerdy and how detailed you are and how much time you actually want to spend into it, right? I am a data nerd and I enjoy it. So I know there are folks that really do. And then it's kind of the in-between factor, right? Finding that balance of how many states you want to research and, kind of pick your poison each year and start developing that strategy. Before you know it, you'll get the basics of every state. And therefore, from there on, kind of you'll have it in your mental piggy bank of how these operate. And then some small changes here and there are going to play a role year to year. But for the most part, you'll have it all down. So that is my 2 cents. Anyways, that's going to wrap up my episode here of Hunting Tags 101 and the strategies that are involved to really just getting started. So I hope that was beneficial to you, and I hope you got something out of it. If you did, please give a 5-star review on any of the platforms that we are on, which is Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Amazon. With that, please also like, subscribe, all that jazz. It really helps commenting. Fantastic. Greatly appreciate you on that. And most importantly, it is tag application season. So if any of this stuff brings questions to you or you want to get involved with tag applications or hunt planning, please go onto the website, book a free consultation, and let's get you ripping for your free hour to talk about what you want to do and start game planning and applying for 2025, 2026, and so on and so forth. Because the faster you start, the more you have in your piggy bank for those future hunts, and the longer you wait, the further and harder they are going to get. So go ahead and check out the Instagram at East to West Hunts, which is East, the number 2, West Hunts. And also go check out the website, www.east, the number 2, westhunts.com. Go ahead and hit that free consultation button, and I look forward to seeing you on that consult. Anyways, thanks for joining today. It was a pleasure giving you some insights, and I hope that it was beneficial to you. Until next time, remember to scout, hunt, and repeat. Thanks.